The sun hung low over the dusty horizon, casting long orange shadows across the town of Redstone. It was the kind of place where the tumbleweeds rolled lazily down Main Street, and the townsfolk went about their daily routines without much fuss. Redstone had been peaceful for years, a small frontier town nestled between rugged hills and endless plains. But peace, as anyone who lived here knew, was fragile. At the heart of Redstone stood the sheriff's office, a modest wooden building, with a freshly painted sign and a single brass star glinting in the fading sunlight. Behind its worn desk sat Jack Wilder, the town's young sheriff. Barely out of his 20s, Jack looked every bit the part of a green lawman, clean-shaven, earnest eyes, and a stance that suggested he was still learning the ropes. But those who knew him well understood there was far more beneath his calm exterior. Jack had come to Redstone just over a year ago, appointed by the county after the previous sheriff had resigned under mysterious circumstances. The townsfolk had been wary of the newcomer, unsure if he was ready to face the threats that lurked beyond their peaceful streets. Rumors whispered of bandits in the nearby hills, dangerous men who preyed on travelers and freight wagons. The bandits hadn't yet dared to set foot in Redstone, but the tension in the air was palpable. Despite his youth, Jack was no ordinary sheriff. Whispers around town hinted at his lightning-fast reflexes and unmatched skill with a revolver. But Jack kept those talents tightly guarded, not wanting to become a target or a legend before earning the trust of his people. Instead, he spent his days patrolling the streets, helping the townsfolk with small troubles, and listening. On this particular evening, Jack sat outside the sheriff's office, the warm breeze carrying the scent of sage and wood smoke. He watched as families closed their shutters and shopkeepers swept their sidewalks, preparing for nightfall. His sharp eyes caught movement near the edge of town, 3 figures slipping behind a ridge. Like shadows themselves, bandits they were scouting. A quiet smile touched Jack's lips. They thought he was just a greenhorn, easy prey, but they had no idea he was faster than lightning. Back inside the sheriff's office, Jack ran a hand over the worn grip of his Colt revolver. He remembered the day he had taken an oath to uphold the law, not just for the badge, but because he believed in protecting the innocent. His father had been a lawman too, a legend in his own right, known across the territories for his speed and justice. Jack had inherited more than just the name. He had inherited that same burning fire to stand up to evil. As dusk deepened into night, the town of Redstone settled into uneasy quiet, but in the hills beyond, the bandits were already planning their move. They would try to catch Jack off guard, to break the spirit of the young sheriff before he could prove himself. What they didn't know was that Jack Wilder had already been preparing for this moment his entire life. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying secrets and warnings. Redstone might be small and quiet, but under its peaceful surface, a storm was gathering. And Sheriff Jack Wilder was ready to meet it head-on with a speed and courage no one would soon forget. The dawn rose pale and quiet over Redstone, but the calm was only skin-deep. Sheriff Jack Wilder knew better than to trust the morning's stillness. His instincts, sharpened by countless hours of practice, and the lessons from his father, told him trouble was stirring beyond the town's borders. As he walked the length of Main Street, tipping his hat to the early risers, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The shutters on windows were still mostly closed, and the usual morning chatter was subdued, as if the townsfolk were holding their breath. Jack's keen eyes scanned the edges of the street and the dusty trails leading out to the hills. Somewhere, out there, the bandits lurked. A week ago, a freight wagon returning from the mining camps had been ambushed on the trail just beyond Redstone's reach. The drivers were left beaten, their cargo stolen. Word spread fast, sending a ripple of fear through the community. The bandits were growing bolder, testing the town's defenses, and, more importantly, testing the sheriff. Jack stopped at the general store, exchanging a few words with the owner, Mr. Harper. "You hear anything new?" Jack asked quietly. Harper shook his head. "Just whispers and shadows, Sheriff. Folks are uneasy, but no one's seen more than a glimpse. They say the bandits are close, maybe hiding in the canyons to the east." Jack nodded. "We can't let them make Redstone a target." Later that day, Jack convened a small meeting at the sheriff's office with the town's most trusted men, the blacksmith, a retired scout, and the ranch owner. They discussed ways to watch the roads, protect the supply wagons, and keep the town safe. Jack spoke calmly but firmly, his experience shining through despite his youth. "We'll set patrols along the trails at dawn and dusk," Jack instructed, "and keep an eye out for signs, broken branches, footprints, anything unusual. The men agreed, though doubt lingered in their eyes. Jack understood that doubt. He had felt it himself when he first arrived. But the difference was that Jack Wilder was ready. He wasn't just a young sheriff with a shiny badge. He was lightning fast, precise, and prepared to defend Redstone with everything he had. That evening, Jack found himself alone outside the jailhouse, cleaning his revolver under the flickering light of an oil lamp. The town had quieted again, but Jack's mind raced. He thought about the bandits, about the previous sheriff who had disappeared, and about the responsibility now resting on his shoulders. Suddenly, the wind shifted, carrying with it the faintest sound, a twig snapping, a shadow moving just beyond the lamplight. Jack's hand instinctively went to his holster. He stood, eyes narrowing, muscles tensing. From the darkness emerged a scout, one of the bandits. No doubt caught spying on the sheriff. Before the man could react, Jack moved with the speed that had become his secret weapon. In a blur, he disarmed the intruder, catching him by the collar and pressing the revolver's barrel against the man's chest. "Who sent you?" Jack demanded, his voice low but unwavering. The bandit's eyes darted, but he said nothing. Jack's stare hardened. "Tell me, or I'll make sure you never run free again." After a tense moment, the man muttered a name. Harlan Black. Jack's jaw tightened. Harlan Black was the notorious leader of the bandits terrorizing the region. If he was sending spies so close to Redstone, it meant the bandits were preparing for something big. Jack dragged the man to the jail, locking the door with a decisive snap. He knew the bandits would retaliate for this capture. They wouldn't just back down. This was no longer a game of shadows. It was a war creeping ever closer. But Jack Wilder was ready. The town might see him as young, as inexperienced, but he had faced faster, deadlier threats before. And like lightning, he was about to strike back. That night, as the town slept uneasily, Jack sat by the jail window, staring out into the darkness. He cleaned his revolver again, fingers steady despite the tension in his chest. The bandits were coming for him, but they didn't know that Jack Wilder wasn't just faster than most. They were about to find out he was faster than lightning. The midday sun cast a golden glare over Redstone's dusty streets. Most townsfolk stayed inside, seeking refuge from the heat, but Sheriff Jack Wilder remained alert, eyes scanning the distant hills. Rumors had turned into reality. The bandits were close, and they meant to make a move. A rider burst into town, urgency in every motion, as he galloped toward the sheriff's office. Jack met him at the door. The rider's voice was hurried and tense. "Sheriff, the bandits are gathered on the ridge, watching us. They're planning something." Jack's expression hardened. "Gather the men. Tell everyone to stay safe and indoors. We'll handle this." Within minutes, a handful of townsfolk armed themselves with rifles and pitchforks, standing behind Jack with steady resolve. The bandits' voices drifted over from the ridge, rough, mocking, confident. They thought they could intimidate the young sheriff and his town. But they hadn't met Jack Wilder. With practiced calm, Jack signaled his men to take positions behind wagons and barrels, ready to defend their homes. The bandits advanced, but Jack's eyes were sharp, movements precise. Suddenly, Jack's revolver was out in a flash. A shot fired that startled the bandits. He moved swiftly, expertly taking cover and returning fire, not to harm recklessly, but to defend with careful aim. His speed was unmatched, and each move seemed to flow effortlessly, like a lightning strike. The townsfolk, inspired by Jack's confidence and skill, steadied their nerves. The bandits faltered under the unexpected resistance. Amid the exchange, Jack spotted the bandit leader, Harlan Black, a tall man with a fierce gaze. Black raised his rifle, but Jack anticipated the move. With a burst of speed, Jack closed the distance, his revolver aimed and ready. The two locked eyes for a brief moment, challengers in a silent duel of skill and will. Jack's quick draw disarmed Black, sending the rifle clattering to the ground. Instead of escalating the fight, Jack pointed his gun steadily and commanded, "Enough. Leave now, or face the consequences." Harlan Black, taken aback by Jack's speed and resolve, nodded reluctantly. "You're faster than I thought, Sheriff." The bandits, seeing their leader's decision, began to retreat, melting back into the hills, leaving the town intact. The townsfolk cheered, rallying around their young sheriff, who had proven himself. In the face of danger, Jack stood tall, knowing this was just the beginning. The bandits would be back, but Redstone was ready under the watchful eye of the fastest sheriff in the West. The days following the first confrontation had brought a cautious calm to Redstone. The townsfolk kept their doors locked and their windows shuttered, eyes scanning the distant hills for any sign of trouble. Sheriff Jack Wilder remained vigilant, coordinating patrols and checks with his allies. But the tension in the air was undeniable. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and painted the sky with streaks of amber and violet, Jack received troubling news from a breathless messenger. Clara, the schoolteacher and one of Jack's closest confidants, had been taken by the bandits. The message was clear. The bandits wanted to lure Jack out, to use Clara as bait. They believed that if they could break the sheriff's spirit, by threatening someone he cared for, the town would fall. Jack's jaw tightened. His calm exterior replaced by a fierce determination. He wasn't going to let fear dictate his actions, nor would he let anyone harm the people he had sworn to protect. Without hesitation, Jack gathered a small group of trusted men and set out toward the hills where the bandits were believed to be hiding. The trail was rough and winding, but Jack's knowledge of the terrain and his lightning-fast reflexes gave him an edge. Hours passed as they moved quietly through the canyons and brush, following faint signs, broken twigs, footprints. In the dirt, a scrap of cloth caught on a branch. The bandits were clever, but Jack's patience and skill were greater. Finally, they reached a narrow ravine where Clara was held in a makeshift camp, guarded by two bandits who were restless and distracted. Jack motioned for his men to stay hidden. Then, like a flash of lightning, he darted forward, disarming one guard before the other could react. Clara's eyes widened with relief as Jack approached. "You're safe now," he said softly, helping her to her feet. The bandits, startled by the swift rescue, scrambled to regroup, but Jack and his men were already ready. A quick skirmish ensued, but Jack's leadership and speed turned the tide. The bandits fled into the hills once more. Defeated and demoralized, back in Redstone, Clara was safely reunited with the townsfolk, and Jack's legend grew even stronger. But he knew the battle was far from over. The bandits had struck back hard, but their efforts only made Jack more determined. The sheriff's lightning-fast reflexes and keen mind were the town's greatest defense, and Jack Wilder would not rest until peace was restored. The air in Redstone was thick with anticipation. For days, the town had braced itself, knowing the bandits would return, this time with everything to lose. Sheriff Jack Wilder moved through the streets with a calm intensity, the weight of responsibility heavier than ever on his shoulders. At sunset, the town gathered quietly in the saloon and around the town square, keeping to the shadows. Word had spread that Harlan Black himself was leading the next attack. The bandit leader was dangerous, ruthless, and faster than anyone Jack had faced. Jack stood at the edge of town, near the old well, his eyes fixed on the ridge where the bandits waited. The fading light cast long shadows, and every muscle in Jack's body was taut, ready to strike. The bandits emerged from the brush like a dark wave, moving steadily toward the town. But Jack had prepared well. He and his allies had set traps and blocked routes, forcing the bandits into narrow paths, where their numbers counted for less. As the first shots rang out, Jack moved with a blur of motion, faster than any eye could follow. His revolver fired with precision, disarming and disabling without needless harm. Townsfolk cheered softly from behind their barricades, their hope rekindled. But then, it came down to Jack and Harlan Black, face to face in the center of Main Street. Black's eyes gleamed with challenge. "You're quick, Sheriff. But this ends today." Jack's reply was steady. "It ends when you leave Redstone for good." The two men circled, each waiting for the other to make the first move. Then, in a flash, they drew their weapons. What followed was a fierce but clean duel, a test of skill, speed, and willpower. Jack's training and lightning-fast reflexes gave him the edge. He disarmed Black, forcing him to his knees. But instead of pressing for a final strike, Jack extended a hand. "Leave now, and no one else gets hurt." Harlan Black looked up, eyes filled with grudging respect. After a long pause, he grasped Jack's hand, rising slowly. The bandits, seeing their leader surrender, dropped their weapons and scattered into the hills. The battle was over. The town was safe, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over Redstone. Jack stood tall, knowing he had protected more than just a town, he had preserved hope. The dawn broke gently over Redstone, washing the town in soft golden light. The fierce battles and tense nights seemed like distant memories now. Sheriff Jack Wilder stood on the porch of the sheriff's office, watching as the townsfolk went about their day with renewed hope and a sense of safety that hadn't been felt for months. The surrender of Harlan Black and the scattering of his bandits had marked a turning point. Without their threat looming, the town began to heal. Windows were opened wide, children's laughter returned to the streets, and the marketplace bustled with activity. Jack felt a quiet pride as he saw the faces of neighbors and friends stronger, more confident, and ready to rebuild. The trust they had placed in him was a weight he carried humbly, but it was also a fire that fueled his commitment to Redstone. He stopped by the schoolhouse, where Clara greeted him with a warm smile. "The children are excited to have you visit today," she said. "They've been asking all about the sheriff who's faster than lightning." Jack chuckled softly. "I hope I'm more than just a story to them." "You're an example," Clara replied, "of courage, kindness, and standing up for what's right." As days turned into weeks, Jack continued to strengthen the town's defenses, not with weapons alone but with a community united. He organized patrols, helped rebuild damaged homes, and worked with the townsfolk to ensure that Redstone remained a place where peace could grow. Late one afternoon, as Jack sat on the porch with his revolver resting beside him, Sam Calder, the blacksmith, joined him. "Sheriff," Sam said, "you've done more than protect us. You've given us hope, and that's something no bandit can take away." Jack nodded thoughtfully. "It's all of us together, Sam. Redstone's strength isn't just in speed or guns, it's in its people." The sun dipped low, casting long shadows over the town. Jack looked out across Redstone, the quiet streets, the warm lights glowing from the windows, and felt a deep sense of belonging. He had arrived as a young sheriff, uncertain and new. Now, he was a protector, a leader, and a symbol of resilience, and though he knew challenges would come again, he was ready. Faster than lightning, wiser than before, Sheriff Jack Wilder stood watch over Redstone, his home, his community, and his future.